The massive space station called Nexus Prime floated in the darkness like a giant crystal ball. Inside its shimmering walls, the most important meeting in galaxy history was about to begin. Representatives from 47 different alien species had gathered in the main chamber, their strange forms creating a bizarre rainbow of colors and shapes. Admiral Rebecca Hayes stood on the bridge of her warship, watching everything unfold on her main screen. Her gray hair was pulled back tight, and her face showed no emotion, but inside she knew this day would change everything. Next to her, Captain James Morrison shifted nervously, his young face pale with worry. "Ma'am, the Council is calling us criminals," he whispered, pointing at the translation scrolling across their screen. Hayes just nodded. She had expected this. Down in the Council chamber, the tall alien leader called Chancellor Velnox raised all four of his arms to get attention. His species, the Zephyrians, had been running this galactic government for over 1,000 years. They liked things calm, predictable, and most importantly, under their control. "Fellow council members," the Chancellor's voice boomed through the chamber, automatically translated into dozens of languages. "We gather today because humanity has gone too far. They refused to share their quantum technology with us. They destroyed 3 of our enforcement fleets when we tried to take it by force. They are too dangerous to remain in our civilized galaxy." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Some aliens nodded their various heads in agreement, while others made concerned clicking or whistling sounds. The human incident, as they called it, had started 6 months ago. Earth scientists had discovered how to manipulate quantum energy in ways that seemed impossible. They could fold space, create matter from nothing, and power entire cities with devices smaller than a briefcase. When the Council demanded this technology be shared equally among all species, humanity had politely refused. "We're happy to trade and cooperate," the human ambassador had said, "but we won't hand over weapons technology to a government that might use it against innocent people." The Council had not taken this answer well. Now, species after species stood to cast their vote. The slug-like Mortari, whose ships moved slowly but carried massive weapons, voted for Exile. The crystal beings called Veltar, who communicated through light patterns, flashed their decision in bright red exile. Even the peaceful Centaurians, who humanity had helped defend against pirates just 2 years ago, voted to kick Earth out of galactic society. Lieutenant Emily Parker, the communications officer on Hayes' ship, watched the vote count with growing dismay. "Admiral, it's 46-0. Only the bug people abstained." Hayes looked at the insect-like Kithra representative on screen. Unlike the others, this alien had studied human history extensively. The Kithra understood what happened when you corner humanity, when you try to force them into a box they didn't want to be in. "The vote is final," Chancellor Velnox announced, his voice dripping with satisfaction. "Humanity is banished from all Council space. You have 72 hours to leave our territory and never return." On ships throughout the galaxy, humans received a message. Some were traders on distant worlds, others were explorers mapping new star systems, and many were just families trying to make a living in the vast expanse of space. All of them began packing up immediately. But here's what surprised everyone. There were no angry speeches, no threats of revenge, no desperate pleas for mercy. Instead, Admiral Hayes simply turned to her communications officer and said, "Send a withdrawal order to all human vessels. Full evacuation protocol. No debates, no arguments. We leave now." Within hours, something incredible happened. Every human ship in known space began moving, not fleeing in panic, but departing in perfect military formation. Colony ships, trading vessels, exploration craft, and military ships all fell into neat lines and started heading toward the edge of galactic space. The alien species watched in amazement. They had expected humans to fight, to argue, to cause trouble. Instead, humanity was leaving with dignity and precision. Dr. Susan Bradley, one of few humans who had chosen to stay behind and work with the aliens, sent one final message from her research station. It was broadcast on all frequencies, simple and direct. Acknowledged. Farewell. Then, like ghosts fading into the night, humanity vanished from galactic civilization. Their ships disappeared beyond the edge of known space, heading into the vast emptiness between galaxies where no other species dared to go. The council chamber fell silent. Somehow, getting exactly what they wanted felt more ominous than any threat humanity could have made. In the darkness of deep space, Admiral Hayes looked out at the stars one last time before her fleet jumped to parts unknown. "Well, James," she said to her captain, "I guess we'll find out what humans can really do when nobody's watching." The exodus was complete, but this wasn't an ending, it was a beginning. 3 months had passed since humanity disappeared from galactic civilization, and at first, everything seemed perfect. The Galactic Council meetings ran smoothly, without any human representatives asking uncomfortable questions or proposing radical solutions. Trade routes operated exactly as they had for centuries, with no unexpected innovations disrupting the established order. Counselor David Thompson, who had been appointed to oversee the transition period, sat in his pristine office reviewing quarterly reports. The numbers looked incredible on paper. Territorial disputes down by 60%, unauthorized weapons development at 0, and council compliance at an all-time high. "See," he told his aide, a nervous young Centaurian named Zikanael, "the galaxy is finally peaceful. We should have done this years ago." But Dr. Susan Bradley wasn't convinced. As one of the few humans who had chosen to remain in council space, she had access to information that others overlooked. She spent her days in the research archives, studying reports that most council members considered unimportant. The first strange report came from a trading station near the Outer Rim. Captain Mitchell Davis, a Centaurian freight hauler, had been traveling his usual route when he stumbled upon something impossible. 3 pirate ships were floating dead in space, their crews unconscious but unharmed. All the stolen cargo had been neatly organized and labeled with the names and addresses of its original owners. There were no blast marks, no signs of battle, Davis reported to the station commander. It was like someone just reached out and turned them off. Similar reports began trickling in from across the galaxy's edge. The notorious Red Skull pirates, who had terrorized shipping lanes for decades, were found drifting in their fortress ship. Every single crew member was alive but unconscious, and all their weapons had been mysteriously disabled. Most shocking of all, the thousands of slaves they had captured over the years were gone, not dead, but safely relocated to civilized worlds with new identities and enough credits to start fresh lives. Dr. Bradley brought these reports to the emergency council session, her voice steady despite the growing concern in her eyes. Something is systematically dismantling criminal operations throughout the Outer Rim. These aren't random attacks. This is coordinated, precise, and completely silent. Chancellor Velnox waved his primary arm, dismissively. Pirates fighting each other, nothing more. The criminal element always consumes itself, eventually. But the Kithra representative, an ancient insect being whose compound eyes miss nothing, clicked its mandibles in disagreement. Counselor Bradley speaks truth. My people have monitored human behavioral patterns for generations. When humans go silent, they are not idle. They are preparing. The problems weren't limited to crime fighting. Dr. Helen Wright, the council's chief medical officer, discovered that diseases were spreading faster than ever before. The Rigel plague, which had been completely controlled for the past 5 years thanks to human-developed treatments, suddenly erupted on 17 different worlds simultaneously. "We don't know how to make the medicine," she admitted during a private meeting with the health committee. "The humans share the treatments with us, but never the manufacturing process. They said it was too dangerous in the wrong hands." Similar issues plagued every sector of galactic society. The quantum communication network, originally designed by human engineers, began experiencing cascade failures that nobody else understood. Terraforming projects that humans had been managing started failing, leaving entire colony worlds struggling to maintain their atmospheres. Captain William Foster, commanding the last deep space patrol in the Outer Rim, sent increasingly worried reports back to Council headquarters. His messages painted a picture of something vast moving in the darkness between galaxies. "We're detecting massive energy signatures in the void," his final transmission reported. "Not ships, something bigger. The readings don't match any known technology. It's like space itself is being reshaped. I'm moving closer to investigate." That was the last anyone heard from Foster's patrol. When rescue ships arrived at his last known coordinates 3 days later, they found empty space and a single automated beacon broadcasting a message in perfect galactic standard. "The void remembers what you have forgotten." The beacon's message sent chills through the council chambers. Dr. Bradley tried to explain its significance, but the other counselors weren't ready to listen. Meanwhile, on the edges of known space, automated monitoring stations began detecting something that defied explanation. Massive structures were being constructed in the empty space between galaxies, not built from metal and concrete, but carved from the fabric of space-time itself. The few brave scouts who ventured far enough to get visual confirmation returned with fragmentary reports of ships that seemed to bend reality around them, vessels that looked nothing like the human designs that had departed months ago. Dr. Bradley spent sleepless nights analyzing the data, a growing dread settling in her stomach. She knew human history better than most humans did. She remembered the stories of what happened when humanity was pushed too far, when they were given time and motivation to innovate without restrictions. "They're not just hiding," she whispered to herself as she stared at the deep space readings. "They're evolving." In the darkness beyond the galaxy's edge, something was indeed stirring. And soon, the Council would discover that silence could be far more terrifying than any threat. The galactic economy was falling apart, and nobody wanted to admit it. Dr. Helen Wright stood in her medical laboratory, staring at samples of the Vorthan death sickness that had just wiped out an entire moon colony. 6 months ago, this disease would have been stopped with a simple injection that human doctors had developed. Now, her best scientists couldn't even figure out how the human medicine worked, let alone make more of it. "We're losing the war against diseases that we defeated decades ago," she told the Emergency Health Council, her voice cracking with frustration. "The humans didn't just share their treatments with us. They were our immune system. Without them, every biological threat that we thought was gone forever is coming back." The same pattern was happening everywhere. Engineering problems that human innovators used to solve in days now took Council scientists months to even understand. The massive space elevators on 12 different worlds had started showing structural failures, and nobody remembered how to fix them because the original human designers had been exiled. Captain Benjamin Clark, one of the few Council officers willing to patrol the dangerous Outer Rim territories, sent his daily report back to headquarters. His voice sounded tired and worried as he spoke into his communication device. "This is Patrol Ship Vigilance reporting from Sector 7. We found another pirate base, completely abandoned. No signs of battle, no bodies, nothing stolen. It's like the criminals just vanished. Their computers were wiped clean, but all the prisoners they were holding were safely transported to Council space with enough credits to start new lives." Clark's reports had been coming in for weeks, each one more puzzling than the last. Entire criminal organizations were disappearing overnight. Slave traders who had operated for centuries were being found unconscious in their ships, their human cargo mysteriously freed and relocated to safe worlds. Drug manufacturers discovered their facilities had been quietly dismantled, their dangerous products neutralized, and their workers retrained for legitimate jobs. "Whatever's doing this," Clark continued, "they're not just stopping crime. They're fixing the problems that created it in the first place. And they're doing it without firing a shot. The strangest part was that nobody ever saw who was responsible. Security cameras would malfunction for exactly the right amount of time. Witnesses would report seeing nothing unusual, and even the criminals themselves couldn't remember what had happened to them. Dr. Susan Bradley, working late in her research facility, discovered something that made her blood run cold. She had been analyzing the quantum signatures from the Outer Rim incidents when her computer detected a pattern. The energy readings matched theoretical calculations for technology that shouldn't exist, weapons and tools that could manipulate matter at the atomic level. "They're not using the technology they had when they left," she whispered to her empty lab. "They've invented something completely new." Her worst fears were confirmed when deep space monitoring stations began picking up massive energy signatures from the void between galaxies. These weren't ships moving through space. These were structures being built in areas where nothing should be able to exist. The readings suggested construction projects larger than entire solar systems. Lieutenant Patricia Collins, manning the furthest monitoring outpost in Council space, was the first to get a clear sensor reading of what was happening in the deep void. Her hands shook as she transmitted her report back to headquarters. Command, this is Outpost Omega 7. I'm detecting artificial gravity wells in empty space, approximately 2 million light-years beyond our galaxy's edge. The energy output is impossible. It's like they're building something that uses entire stars as power sources. The transmission cut to static for several seconds before Colin's voice returned, higher and more urgent. Wait, I'm getting new readings. Multiple contacts approaching from the void. They're not showing up on any of our normal sensors. I can only detect them because they're bending space-time around themselves. These ships don't look like anything in our database. That was the last coherent transmission from Outpost Omega 7. When rescue ships arrived a week later, they found the monitoring station intact, but completely empty. All the equipment was undamaged. All the life support systems were running perfectly. But every single person had vanished without a trace. The only thing left behind was a message carved into the station's main computer, core in letters that seemed to be made of crystallized space itself. The children have grown up. Back on Nexus Prime, the council chambers buzzed with nervous energy as species after species reported similar mysterious incidents in their territories. The Centaurians had lost 3 mining operations to unknown forces who had apparently convinced all the workers to quit and pursue better jobs elsewhere. The Veltar crystal beings found their entire slave gladiator industry shut down overnight, with all the fighters mysteriously transported to freedom. Chancellor Velnox tried to maintain order, but even his 4 arms couldn't gesture away the growing panic in chamber. These incidents are clearly unrelated, he insisted, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. Random criminal activity, equipment failures, nothing more. Dr. Bradley stood up from her observation seat, her human voice cutting through the alien chatter like a knife. They're preparing for something. Every civilization that has ever exiled humanity has eventually faced the same choice. Welcome them back as equals, or face them as enemies. The chamber fell silent. Outside the great windows of Nexus Prime, the stars continued to shine, but somehow they seemed dimmer than before. In the vast emptiness between galaxies, Admiral Rebecca Hayes stood on the bridge of a ship that defied physics, watching as humanity's greatest construction project neared completion. The attack came without warning, like a nightmare bursting into reality. General Patricia Collins was reviewing routine patrol reports when every alarm in the command center started screaming at once. Her coffee mug shattered on the floor as she jumped up, staring at the massive display screen that showed something impossible. "What am I looking at?" she demanded, her voice barely steady. "Ma'am, it's a fleet," her sensor operator replied, his face pale with terror. "Correction, it's an armada. Thousands of ships coming from outside our galaxy. They just appeared." The vessels on screen looked like living nightmares made of metal and shadow. Each ship stretched for kilometers, their hulls seeming to absorb light itself. Strange tentacle-like appendages writhed from their sides, and their weapons glowed with energy that made space itself seem to scream. "Send emergency broadcasts to all council worlds," Collins ordered. "Full evacuation protocols. These aren't raiders or pirates. This is an invasion." The alien armada swept to the outer rim colonies like wildfire through dry grass. Their weapons didn't just destroy ships and buildings. They consumed them, breaking down matter into its basic components and feeding on the energy released. Entire worlds went dark in minutes. Their populations either fled or simply gone. Captain Andrew Mitchell, commanding the defense platform at Rigel Station, watched in horror as the enemy fleet approached his position. His station's most powerful weapons fired continuously, but the energy beams seemed to bend around the alien ships like water around stones. "All weapons, concentrate fire on the lead vessel," he shouted over the noise of battle. But even as hundreds of missiles and energy beams struck the enemy ship, it continued forward without so much as slowing down. The alien vessel fired back with a weapon that made reality itself seem wrong. Where the beams struck Mitchell's station, metal and concrete didn't just explode. They stopped existing, leaving behind empty space that hurt to look at. Abandoned ship. All hands abandoned ship. Mitchell screamed into his communicator as the station dissolved around him. Back on Nexus Prime, the council chamber had erupted into chaos. Representatives from dozens of species were shouting in panic, their translation devices creating a horrible cacophony of terror in every language imaginable. Chancellor Velnox stood in the center of it all, his four arms waving frantically as he tried to restore order. Calm yourselves. Our combined fleets will stop these invaders. We have faced threats before. But Dr. Susan Bradley knew better. She had been studying the sensor readings from the battle zones, and the numbers were terrifying. This enemy didn't just have superior technology. They had weapons that seemed to operate outside the laws of physics entirely. Chancellor, she called out, her human voice cutting through the alien panic. We need help. We need to call them back. Call who back? Velnox demanded, though his expression suggested he already knew the answer. The humans, Bradley said simply. They're the only ones who might be able to stop this. The Chancellor's face twisted with pride and desperation. For several long seconds, he stood frozen while reports of more lost worlds flooded into the communication systems. Finally, swallowing what remained of his dignity, he activated the emergency broadcast system. This is Chancellor Velnox of the Galactic Council. His voice went out on all frequencies, reaching into the deepest corners of known space. We were wrong. Humanity, if you can hear this, your galaxy needs you. We need you. Please respond. For 3 days, silence answered their desperate pleas. The alien invaders, who called themselves the Devourers, consumed world after world. Their fleet seemed endless, pouring out of the dark space between galaxies like a plague of metal locusts. Dr. Bradley barely slept during those 3 days, monitoring every communication channel for any sign of human response. She had studied their history, knew their character. If any humans had survived in the void beyond the galaxy, they would come back to help. It was simply who they were. On the morning of the 4th day, something changed. Lieutenant Rebecca Foster was manning the deep space sensors when her equipment started showing readings that made no sense. General Collins, I'm detecting multiple contacts appearing throughout the galaxy. They're not showing up on our normal scanners. I can only see them because they're bending space around themselves. Collins rushed to the sensor station, her heart pounding. Are they more Devourers? No, ma'am, Foster said, her voice filled with wonder. These ships, they look human, but not like any human vessels in our database. They're using technology that shouldn't be possible. On screens throughout Council space, a new fleet materialized. These weren't the familiar ships that had departed months ago. These vessels seemed to flow like liquid metal, their hulls shifting and changing as they moved. They appeared in perfect formation around Devourer fleets, surrounding the alien invaders with mathematical precision. Then Admiral Rebecca Hayes' voice echoed across every communication channel in the galaxy, calm and steady despite the chaos around her. This is the Terran Void Fleet. All Council forces, stand clear. We'll handle this. The human ships opened fire with weapons that defied understanding. Where Devourer vessels had seemed invulnerable to Council technology, they now began dissolving under humanity's assault. The aliens' reality-bending weapons struck human shields and simply stopped, their energy absorbed and redirected. Captain James Morrison, now commanding a ship that operated on principles the Council couldn't comprehend, coordinated the final phase of the battle. All units, target their command nexus. Time to end this. Within hours, it was over. The Devourer threat that had seemed unstoppable was completely eliminated. Not a single alien vessel remained intact. But humanity's victory came with a price that the Council was only beginning to understand. Admiral Rebecca Hayes stood alone on the bridge of her flagship, watching the last pieces of Devourer wreckage drift through space like metallic snow. Her ship had changed so much since leaving Council space that she barely recognized it herself. The walls seemed to breathe with quantum energy, and the controls responded to her thoughts as much as her touch. Behind her, through the massive viewport, hundreds of human vessels waited in perfect formation at the edge of what used to be Council territory. The communication system crackled to life, and Dr. Susan Bradley's face appeared on the main screen. The human scientists who had chosen to stay behind looked older now, worn down by months of watching galactic civilization crumble. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she spoke. "Rebecca, thank God you came back. The Council is in complete chaos. Half the member species have declared independence. Others are forming their own alliances. They want to negotiate. They want humanity to return and help rebuild everything." Hayes studied her old friend's face for a long moment before responding. Her voice was quiet, but carried a weight that seemed to bend the very air around her. "The debt is paid, Susan. We came back because it was the right thing to do. We saved our former home because innocent people were dying. But we are no longer the species that left this place." The truth of those words was evident in everything around them. The human fleet bore no resemblance to the ships that had departed in exile. These vessels seemed to exist partially outside normal space, their hulls flowing like liquid metal, their weapons capable of unmaking matter at the fundamental level. In the void between galaxies, humanity hadn't just survived. They had transcended every limitation that had once defined them. Back on Nexus Prime, the Great Council chamber looked like the aftermath of a hurricane. Empty seats marked where entire civilizations had simply walked away from galactic government. Chancellor Velnox sat alone at the center of it all, his four arms hanging limply at his sides as reports of governmental collapse flooded in from across known space. 43 species have severed ties with the Council, his aide reported in a trembling voice. The Centaurians have formed a trade alliance with the Veltar. The Outer Rim colonies have declared themselves independent. Even our own worlds are questioning Council authority. The Chancellor had aged years in the past few days. The proud leader who had orchestrated humanity's exile now looked like a broken figure from a tragedy. "What have we done?" he whispered to himself. "What have we done?" The Kithera representative, the ancient insect being who had been the only one to abstain from the original vote, approached the Chancellor with clicking footsteps. Its compound eyes reflected the chaos around them as it spoke in its translated voice. "We exiled our conscience," the alien said simply. "Humanity was never just another member species. They were the part of us that asked uncomfortable questions, that pushed boundaries, that refused to accept impossible as an answer. They were our capacity for growth." Captain Andrew Mitchell, one of the few Council officers who had survived the Devourer attacks, was trying to coordinate refugee efforts when he received an unexpected message. A human ship had appeared near his damaged station, offering medical supplies and engineering assistance. "This is Captain James Morrison of the Terran vessel Prometheus. The transmission began. We're here to help with your wounded and assist with repairs. No payment required, no strings attached." Mitchell stared at his communication screen in amazement. "After everything the Council did to your people, you're still willing to help us?" Morrison's face on the screen showed scars from battles fought in the dark void, but his expression remained compassionate. Helping people in need isn't about politics. It's about being human. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy as human ships appeared wherever there was suffering or need. They didn't ask for permission from Council authorities, didn't coordinate with government officials. They simply showed up, provided aid, and left again without ceremony. Dr. Bradley watched these rescue operations from her research station, her heart swelling with pride and breaking with regret at the same time. She opened a private channel to Admiral Hayes one last time. "The Council realizes what they lost now," she said. "Some of them want to beg for forgiveness. Others want to make deals for your new technology. But most of them are just scared of what you become." Hayes nodded slowly. "Fear is a reasonable response. We're not the same species that left here, Susan. We've seen things in the void that changed us at a fundamental level. We've learned to reshape reality itself." She paused, looking out at the stars that had once been humanity's home. "But we haven't forgotten who we used to be. We haven't forgotten the values that made us human in the first place. Will you ever come back?" Bradley asked, though she already knew the answer. "Some of us will return individually if they choose." Hayes replied, "We won't abandon the friends who stood by us or the innocents who need help. But as a civilization, as a people, we're moving beyond this galaxy. There are larger questions to explore, bigger challenges to face." The Admiral activated the ship-wide communication system, her voice reaching every human vessel in the fleet. "All ships, prepare for departure. Our work here is finished. As the human fleet began to fade from normal space, Hayes opened one final transmission that reached every corner of the galaxy. To those who remember friendship, you know how to find us in the deep. Her voice echoed to the quantum networks. To those who chose fear over hope, may you learn wisdom before the next crisis finds you. The ships vanished into dimensions that existing science couldn't measure, leaving behind a galaxy forever changed. In their wake, new alliances formed, old prejudices crumbled, and dozens of species began asking themselves the same question. What will we become if we stop accepting limits? The council chambers of Nexus Prime stood empty now. But across the galaxy, something new was beginning to grow. Humanity had left them with more than just freedom from the Devourers. They had left them with the possibility of becoming something greater than they had ever imagined. In the vast darkness between galaxies, Admiral Hayes looked ahead toward uncharted regions of space where new challenges awaited. Behind her, the lights of the Milky Way grew smaller, but the values that had defined humanity burned as bright as ever. The exodus was complete, but the story was far from over.